The information economy has arrived. The world is teeming with innovation as new business models reinvent every industry. Inside Analysis is your source of information and insight about how to make the most of this exciting new era. Learn more at InsideAnalysis.com.
InsideAnalysis.com.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the only coast-to-coast radio show that's all about the information economy. It's time for Inside Analysis. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, is here today with a very special show near the end of a very special year, 2022. Of course, we're knocking on the door of 2023. And the title for today's show is fantastic. Art for Humanity, the Herd Initiative. That's H-E-R-D. We're going to be talking to Mr. Stan Herd, a truly unique and wonderful artist, folks, and his right-hand man, my good buddy John Czar, is in the mix as well. We're going to talk about some of these projects these gentlemen are working on, which are absolutely brilliant. I mean, really very, very clever. And I guess what I would say is what's old is new again. You don't need bits and bytes to create artwork. Of course, we've had artwork since the dawn of time, since the dawn of human beings. You could argue that maybe even animals engage in some sort of artwork. I mean, beavers create dams, right? I bet they're pretty proud when that dam is done too. So artwork, it's part of the beauty of our world around us. And it really is transformational. It's transcendent. Artwork helps us kind of become at peace with ourselves. You know, I remember years ago, I had the remarkable opportunity to study in Venice, Italy, and we would look at slides in the classroom on Tuesdays, and then on Thursdays we'd go out and look at the actual artwork. And I remember studying Tintoretto and Titian and some of these amazing artists. And I had my first ever aesthetic experience in one of the museums where I was looking at a picture of a painting of the Virgin Mary, and I was just absolutely blown away. I could not draw myself away from that painting for about 25 or 30 minutes. And that's called an aesthetic experience. That's when I learned what that meant. I was like, oh, that's what that means. And our artists today create these amazing experiences. There's one that's just been rolled out of Maya Angelou down in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia. So without further ado, we have Stan Herd and John Czar. Stan, welcome to Inside Analysis. Tell us a bit about yourself and this Herd Initiative.
Great, Eric. I really appreciate it. We're like 7 or 8 days into this journey down here, and the crew I put together with John leading the kind of the communications effort around it. It's a multi-group. Everybody's got their own discipline to make all of this happen. Kyra is the art director, but we were down here 2 years ago to create an image for John Lewis. I actually showed up in town to do a portrait of Stacey Abrams because I was so impressed with her voice and her energy in that first runoff. And the city said, well, we can let you use a park, but you can't do anything overtly, one part or the other. And so they said, you can't do Stacey. And they asked me if I would consider John Lewis. And I was like, oh my God, John Lewis was perfect. He had just passed. And we set about in 8 or 10 days to create the portrait of John. Came back a year ago, did the portrait of Stacey Wilson, the astronaut in Downtown Park, first Black female astronaut, or second, I think. And then this year, when we found out that the election was going to get interesting here, that this might be the center of attention in the world of politics, and really what happens in the United States affects the rest of the world so much that this really is a global thing happening here, we think. And so I grabbed my crew and I said, what do you guys think? We just put together the Herd Initiative. John helped put together the Herd Initiative. So we are a nonprofit through the Giving Back Fund. Mark Pollock's amazing guy there. And we just set about to make this happen. We have a great friend in town here, Scott Satterwhite, who put in the first money so that we could actually pay for our Airbnb and a little bit of food. So we're kicking it here in Atlanta. It's beautiful down here. The people are, everybody says this, but actually Atlanta is filled with amazing people. I've never seen a friendlier group of people through the mayor's office and through the parks people. And so we're here. We just created this image. And the way that happened, Eric, was that my ex-wife, Janice, the mother of our son, we all came up with a different idea of what we might do. Rosalind Carter, we went back and forth, and she came up with Maya. And then we watched the documentary, and then we discovered her quote. John, you say it.
And I rise.
And still I rise. And it was like, that's what we have to do. Her voice is rising out of the Georgia soil. Her portrait is rising out of the Georgia soil. Her history, and it's an amazing history. So, we got to meet Reverend Warnock. We got to meet the mayor. We're not supposed to be real partisan here, but we just believe that you should support and vote for somebody who believes in women's rights. That's a pretty simple thing.
Yeah, well, let's talk about your approach here and how you do this artwork, because it's really just fantastic stuff. A lot of times people will use a canvas and paints, or people will use chalk on the sidewalk, like my daughter. All sorts of other media and tools are used for artwork. You use good old-fashioned Mother Nature, and you create these images that are viewable from the sky and are just absolutely stunning. Tell us a bit about that process and how you came up with the idea, but how you actually do it and make this stuff happen.
Sure. The earthworks grew out of the fact that I grew up on a farm. I was one of 5 siblings. My 4 brothers and I got onto the tractor at 11. We would work for 1 year on the farm. I walked the dirt fields, I rode an old Case tractor back in the day. I mean, I'm older than I look. But I was really, really, really connected to the ground. And when I got out in the art world and I wanted to be an abstract expressionist and, got into Dada and everything, I wanted to leave all of that behind, all of that, farm country behind. At about 22 or 3, I returned to the farm and worked with my father a year after being in the city for a while. And I came up with the idea, quite frankly, that I could use those fields of my father and my grandfather and 7 generations of our family in the United States to create art. And then it's been a learning process ever since. For a long time, we only had helicopters or airplanes or a high ladder. And now I've got John Czar with his beautiful drone, and other friends, Mark Havner, my friend back in Kansas. But I have these guys that are bringing images of my work, and right at sunset with this beautiful sunlight dappling across the trees onto our ground in the park. And, basically now we just lay the images out with compost, mulch. We try to do environmentally friendly stuff, obviously sand, and create very subtle images. And Kyra is really helpful with that. So we've got a great crew. We're really making some, we're actually getting better at this, I think.
Wow. That's so cool. And so you have the vision of what you want to create, but then you actually go out into the field and work on this stuff. And it's, in other words, you can see it from the sky. And of course, the drones can give us visibility into that now, but any plane flying over is going to look down and go, holy Christmas, that's a piece of art down on the ground. John, John, why don't you tell us a bit about your role? 55 countries in 7 years. I mean, you're bouncing all around. That's a pretty impressive history you've got there. Tell us about how it works for you.
Well, I really wanted to understand people, and I figured a long time back that the best way to do that is to travel and to be able to experience other people's culture directly through living in these places. And over time, it came about where Stan was needing some help about 5 years ago. And I came into the mix. And ever since, there's been a lot of works that we've worked on and a lot of things that Stan has taught and inspired me. And through working with him throughout the years, I kept getting more and more inspired. And now we are finally reaching a point where we have a nonprofit that is able to push very important messages and ideas and things that need to be heard on a large scale.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And so you figured out you have to immerse yourself in these cultures to learn about them. And you can't learn too much through a television or through an iPhone. You can learn a fair amount, but you don't learn like you do when you go to the culture and you spend time with the people, especially when your project is to create some work of art, right, John?
Exactly. If you're getting something online or, any secondary source, it's just that, it's secondary. So if you're really wanting to experience it and have the idea of what it really is, being able to put yourself in those situations and to get out into the world is the best way to know if what you're hearing is actually accurate or not.
Somebody asked John the other day, so what do you just like show up at an airport, or do you actually get out and spend a little time? And John's lived in a number of these countries. He isn't just traveling and going, hey, I think I'm going to run over for a weekend over to Finland. You know, he lives in a lot of these places and enmeshes himself into the culture in a real deep way. I think he's really just trying to find a wife. I'm not sure.
That's a noble cause in and of itself, no doubt about it. But you bring up a really good point, and maybe I'll throw this over to you, Stan. You know, empathy is central to happiness, I believe, to awareness, and awareness is central to happiness. And empathy really arises from walking in the shoes of other people and from living in their world and appreciating where they're coming from, not just bringing your sort of predetermined biases and prejudices that Mark Twain once quipped was common sense. The set of prejudices you've acquired by the age of 18 is viewed as common sense. But when you spend time in other cultures and you really immerse yourself in those environments, that's when you can build empathy, and that's when you can learn, right, Stan?
I believe it is. And, you know, John's traveled a lot more than I have. Maybe I've done a little bit more of a deep dive by spending months and months working with people in Brazil and in China. The China project was, 17 or 18 trips over a 2-year period of time with our driver and 100 people working on the field for quite a while. The workers on the hillside in Milo, China, on our acre piece would just kind of stare at us when we came. And then we would leave for a week, and then we'd come back. They would and finally, after about the 4th trip, we showed up and they applauded.
That's pretty impressive.
And then they started inviting us to eat with them, and it was food that they cooked in their villages there. And just the fact that they invited us to sit, we couldn't talk. I mean, I knew Hongashi Renchini, Nishi Wada Hopinyo. I know 2 things in Chinese, I would say that over and over. They would go Shenma, which means what? I knew what Shenma was.
So you know a third thing.
Galion. Well, I know a few things, but very few. But my son Evan learned a lot more. And Eric, is exactly what you're saying. After a while, you were in that culture. You weren't looking at them and they looking at you. You were inculcated into their deep, the essence of who those people were. I'm not saying, everybody has a different level of that immersion, but it was life-changing for me. And I believe the more I'm around people, and I'm sure John would share this, is the more empathy I have for people in the world, and the less appreciation I have for people that are so nationalistic and think that their stuff's all the greatest and everybody else is a secondary. It's just not true. Those people, the people out there love their children every bit as much as we do, and maybe more. I don't know.
Yeah, what's his name? Sting had that song, I hope the Russians love their children too. Remember that one?
Yes. Oh my gosh. You know that. Yeah, the history.
I'm an old timer. I've been around the block a few times. But you reminded me of something that I think is very significant and compelling and worthy of discussion here, which is that something I learned a long time ago. Other languages aren't just sets of different words for the same things, right? A language is an expression of the culture. And so in different languages, how you describe something will reveal key aspects of that particular culture. And, we all have certain ties that bind. We were joking before the show, and I think as we were talking about the podcast bonus segment, that we all have mothers, right? We all have that in common. We all have fathers at some point, no matter how involved they may be in our lives. But we have family, we have friends. So there are some basic things that are the same, but still to respect other cultures requires that you respect other cultures and understand that things are different over there and may not be the way you would have them. But if you respect other cultures, I think it really helps you grow as a human being. What do you think, Stan, and then maybe John real quick?
Well, to me, what we are as Americans, we're an amalgamation consortium of all of this culture to begin with. You know, the history of this country as we Europeans advanced after De Soto and Columbus and the different folks arrived over the centuries. We are this amalgamation of people over the last few centuries of all of these different cultures, but we've mixed it all into a big souffle and called it, something. And then we stand up and go, we are this. And we're really a bit of everything. So when you travel over there, you see bits of yourself if you go to a country where your people came from. And it resonates in a really strong way. And that beauty out there, especially when you go to some place like a more remote place in China, we would go back into a village area where there were people, not driving cars and that type of thing. And you really get the feeling. It was so exciting for my son Evan at 28 at the time to immerse himself in that more distant part of the world and fall in love with these people and with their heart and their culture on their sleeve. Same as in Brazil. But John, you've seen a lot more country than I have.
Yeah, I mean,
you've been kicked out of better countries than I've been.
Oh, goodness gracious. I would say of all the travels I've done, one of the most important things that I can take away from everything is that there are more things that connect us as a people, as people on this planet living together, than differences between us. And I think that culture sometimes acts as this guise, this illusion, this clothing, if you will, cloaking the true reality. And it's important to be able to understand how subjective culture can be and how the relativity is based on what we start in, or start with rather. As an example, I lived in India for half a year with an Indian family, and it would be very commonplace to eat raw onions in the morning. Now, of course, with my cultural background, I mean, many people maybe who are hearing this are going, what? But the thing is, because I allowed myself that opportunity, that chance to try it, and went in with a blank slate and say, okay, well, what is this? And lo and behold, I liked it. I enjoyed it and continued to eat raw onions every morning with my host parent. And I wouldn't have known that had I not posed.
That's too funny. And we may want to work on that to find you a wife, but we'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanagh.
Take us to the future.
All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis. Take us to the future indeed. And the present now has another beautiful piece of artwork in Atlanta, Georgia area of Maya Angelou. Absolutely beautiful piece, folks. You have to hop online and do a search to find this thing if you're just listening to this on the radio right now. But we're with Stan Hurd and John Czar, both of the Hurd Initiative. And Stan, I'll throw it over to you. This artwork, you use nature. So you use grass, you use rocks, you use mulch, all sorts of different things at a scale that is such that the human observer can see it from up on high. Now, is there any place in Atlanta where you can kind of look down on it from a office tower or something, or does someone have to be flying overhead to see it?
When we were downtown in, what was the name of the park? Woodruff Park. We had a guy show up, handsome, stalwart, business type guy came up with his group, and he said, we're in that high rise over there. We're watching this the last 4 days of you building this thing, and we're amazed. And I wanted to bring my people down. This is my secretary, this is my assistant, and they all traveled down from that high rise to, and that doesn't often happen, but we certainly are visible from high rise buildings. The first piece that I did in New York was actually on Trump's property when he had first purchased the Penn Square Railroad Yard, and then since then has built 7 buildings there. The people in the high rise there watched us, and there's a movie out about my work, or about me, I guess, called Earthworks, and John Hawkes plays my role. I got to meet John for the month that he spent in Kansas making the film with us. I didn't make the film; a friend made the film, but we won some awards in some of the smaller film festivals. But people in the high rise there could watch us and did watch us for 3 months to creating this piece on Manhattan Island. And the movie's pretty good. I mean, they make me out to be a little bit of a hick, and as you can see, I'm very sophisticated.
That's funny. You know, and I read or I listened to your TED talk, and you talked about how you went down to Trump Tower and were meeting with some folks, and the guy asked you, okay, well, how much money do you want? And you said, well, I don't really want any money. I just want access to the land. And he seemed to be somewhat surprised by that and left the room, came back 10 minutes later and said, have at it, right?
That was the director's kind of take on things. It had some great similarities, but that's kind of what happened. It took them more than 10 minutes, but they did. Andy Weiss and Charlie Reese were the two vice presidents. I never asked to meet Trump. I wasn't a great fan of him back in the day, less so now, but he was very kind to me when I did meet him. Extended his hand, met my family. I took my 3-year-old son into his office, and he was very pleasant. But the vice presidents shared the story with me later about how it went down, because there were groups of people that really wanted that land to do something, and they didn't want Trump to build the big high rises, so they were using it as blackmail, and they were trying to extract 50,000 or 100,000 out of him to do something. And I just said, well, I just want the land. I don't need any money. I'll take it if you want to give it to me. And that's what sold the deal. I won't say the words that they said, Trump said when he said, give it to me.
You can't curse on air. You can't curse on air. We'll still get in trouble with that. I think that rule is silly, quite frankly, but it's still a rule for some odd reason.
No, I hear you. But anyway, we had a lot of fun on that. It wasn't fun, actually. It was 7 or 8 months of really grueling work, and cost me in a lot of ways that I won't go into, but we did the piece, and it was there for a year, and then it was torn, laid to waste as they built the new buildings.
Geez,
so I'm still in touch with the VP who left the Trump organization when Mr. Trump ran for office. So
yeah,
I still talk.
Well, you've created many, many works of art. So this Maya Angelou is just the latest in a long series. How many of these Earth projects have you created, and what can you tell about some of the other big ones you've done over your career?
Well, the biggest piece by miles, maybe the most important in some small way, was the Havana piece. We traveled to Havana and created a portrait of Jose Marti's poem Colectivo de Rosa Blanca, the White Rose. It's a very simple image. As an art image, it was at best mediocre, but the experience of being in that country when George Bush, I think, had called them the enemy of the people or the evil empires, that he named a few. We were actually doing work through the Senate, through the Senate intelligence guy that was a friend of mine, and got to Cuba and did this piece. We got a lot of traction in Cuba. That piece was pretty amazing just by the experience and the people I met. But doing the piece in China, 2 years in China, working with Chinese laborers and engineers, and on an 11-degree slope where they hand placed thousands of pieces of marble and granite to create this permanent image.
Wow!
Just absolutely a stunning experience.
Well, and that's so cool, because if you look back at the ancient pieces of artwork, like the pyramids, for example, or statues, or these just gorgeous artworks that have been created hundreds and thousands of years ago, that's the kind of stuff that you're doing. And not too many people do that stuff these days. Now art is in NFTs, for example, which is fine. I think every form of art is fine. I've always been a little bit skeptical of people who get great artworks and then just keep them in their house and don't let other people see them. I don't like that, because you want to share the artwork, because it really is, as I mentioned earlier, transcendental, right? You can look at a piece of artwork and feel something that was created by this person. You may not have any idea what they were trying to say, but it doesn't mean you can't feel it in your heart as you experience the artwork. And so I have to say, it's really amazing that you put forth such incredible effort to create these artworks that, many of them live for a long period of time. That one with all these pieces of marble, that's going to be visible for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. That's pretty cool stuff. What do you think, John Czar?
I think that it's epic. I mean, it literally
literally epic.
It's the grandest of the grands. It's made to last.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. So we've talked about some of the materials that you use, and it's of course according to whatever the imagery is, but what are some of the more interesting materials that you've used over the years for these projects? I'll throw that to Stan.
I use a little bit of everything. I mean, we've used a multiplicity of flowers on some images. I mean, picture a giant image that's, a lot of them, Eric, are just subtracted out of existing vegetation, grass. So you've got standing grass, you've got grass mowed down to there, and then you've got the bare ground. And then you can pull the dark, wet earth up, and you've got a fourth color. So you can do that same thing with wheat, wheat, maize, corn, alfalfa, which is a grass or a legume, and then you've got all of the flowers, and you've got bricks, and you could do this out of crushed cans. I've made images out of crushed cans.
Cocoa.
I've had people come out dressed in shirts and as part of the color for my Coca-Cola piece, my Pepsi Coke playoff. So that really, it's just, it's untapped what could be used to create images. And one of the things that I have figured out that John and I and Kyra and Evan and Brandy talk about is, we believe that our work here is very serious, trying to get people out to vote. We were talking to Vicky and a guy named Paxis, who's kind of amazing in getting the vote out here. They can't say, vote for this guy, but they can say, please go vote. So we are interfacing with all of these folks to do something really important here. But 6 months ago, we were on a field, or 7, we were on a field doing a giant Oreo cookie ad.
Wow.
And they did very well. And it was fun. And it took me a while, maybe into my 40s, and I went, Herd, don't take yourself so seriously. I mean, make art, try to do good, but you've got to make money and take care of those around you and yourself. I like a little nicer bottle of wine now than I used to 10 years ago. And so I'm really trying to balance not becoming, one of those, people hammering their fist on the table, and to enjoy this. If we're not having fun at this, what the hell are we doing?
Right.
But at the same time, make the money. That's why the Herd Initiative is about now. By the way, I don't even know how that really works, but we have this 501c3, and we're nonprofit and working with the Giving Back Fund. But we're we want to take this on the road. We want to go back to China. We want to go to Brazil, and we would love it if people supported it.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing, and I like that. You're checking your ego at the door, or checking your ego at the tree stump that you pass by as you go out into the forest to work on all this stuff. And it's working with your hands. I've created a few things with my hands, and there's something very special about creating something that you can then look at and admire, and look at that. There's the work that I created, and it's another part of this beautiful world. And again, it's reflective of the human spirit. And so, of course, you've chosen Maya Angelou, and I'm a huge fan of her work and of all poetry, quite frankly, because poetry it's a very special art form. Itself, it is transcendent. You can use a bunch of words, but in a much different context, and it can communicate something very powerful. I was arguably shaped by T.S. Eliot, the poet Thomas Stearns Eliot. When my father gave me a book when I was probably 12 years old, it was a very strange evening. He would just walk down the hallway all purposeful and handed me this book of Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. And I just started reading all these poems, and it changed my life. And then years later, I wind up founding an analyst firm with a gentleman named Dr. Robin Bloor, who's British. And I remember telling him this story, and he told me a story. He goes, it's like, yes, I had a teacher named Rita who took a special shine to me, and she said I could do something with this one. And he explained how she really took him under her wing and helped him understand nuances of language and communication and poetry and so forth. And then he explained that she had someone do that for her years ago when she was a young girl in England. And that person's name was Thomas Stearns Eliot. And I was like, oh, holy Christmas, I am now in the direct lineage of my idol, of my writing idol. And so it's moments like that when you could just take stock and go, okay, there's something else going on in the world that is not completely
made the world-
explainable by
Made the
science.
world- yeah, it made the world a little smaller for you. You realize you're 6 degrees
Of separation from this guy who was my
of separation
absolute.
from those who inspire you and are great.
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Well, let's see. Let's talk about some of your other works. And just another reminder to our audience, we're booking out next year right now, folks. So don't be shy. Send us an email to info@insideanalysis.com. As we're talking here with Stan Hurd and John Czar, they appear to have a little bit of an internet connectivity issue. So they appear to be back with us again. So John, I'll throw it over to you. I mean, it must be very exciting for you to deal with this and to be in this situation. I mean, did you ever expect to have traveled 55 countries and worked on all these different artworks? Real quick, John, take it away.
As far as getting involved in the arts, honestly, I did not expect to be working with the arts full time. I've always had a passion for artwork and travel. That was my main priority, was really just I needed to get out and see the world. And I like to take things as they come, and any opportunity, if it seems viable, I like to try. And as far as being able to work with Stan and being able to create these monumental earthwork art pieces, that it's just something that I'm very grateful for and has really taught me and pushed me to grow both as an artist and a person.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And you're, Stan, you're kind of handing the baton slowly but surely off, not just to John, but also your son, who gets involved with you, and really anyone else who comes along. And that's the beautiful thing about artwork, is that it really does inspire people. And so maybe someone sees this work and they weren't feeling too well that day, and it really changed their day and got them excited about things and got them excited to rise again and get back into the action. Right, Stan?
Absolutely. And Kyra, the lady that works with us, who's my art director now,
Yes.
talk about handing off the mantle. She's got to the point that she can kind of almost do these without me, which is both exhilarating to a point and a little scary. It's like, if I go, who's going to keep this stuff up? But she's amazing. And my son Evan is kind of my spiritual guide in so many ways. He lives life in a way more Zen way. He's taught me that as I've gotten older, and I've watched him interact with people in a way, that's kind of opposite of me. He can tell when my BS factor is going strong. I can just look at him, and when I'm talking with somebody, I can read his face to whether he's going, you don't need to push yourself that much. So he's really seriously in my life hold me back. Just being around these young people, and not just the ones that are working with me, but the people we bump up against that work with us in every site. When we were in Pennsylvania, we met some great people from, the school there, Penn State. Just that energy of young people. And we see that in their eyes, Eric, when they look at the image they've been working on and they see it from the air, and their eyes just go, we did that. And I think it can change lives. And, we wouldn't be doing this. I don't think all art has to be active and all of that. But
yeah,
we're doing, I think, does, because it's, attention.
Yeah, that's beautiful stuff. Well, folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back with our final segment. You are listening to Inside Analysis.
Paid for by Legal Alert Line.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, a very special show today, talking about Art for Humanity and the Hurd Initiative with legendary artist Stan Hurd, and also my good buddy John Czar, who does a lot of work with him and has traveled to 55 countries over 7 years. Wow, that is called a journeyman, my friend. But I did want to talk about this other project you have related to the golden ratio. It's a very interesting concept. You see this everywhere in nature, and it's tied to the Fibonacci sequence. So, Stan, tell us a bit about this Fibonacci sequence project of yours.
Well, probably 20 years ago, I had a junior high student come on one of my fields, and he said, "You should do the Fibonacci sequence." And I was like, "The what?" And so I went home and looked it up, and I was fascinated by it, as most people are when they see it. And it's simply a pattern that is evidenced in a lot of nature. I mean, an amazing amount of types of natural displays of this pattern. Fibonacci was a mathematician. So the Fibonacci sequence simply displays out into the world, and you could, the idea that I had was to create a 20-acre piece. For 4 or 5 years, it was just, I'm going to do this. I'm going to create this giant work. And I talked to Google headquarters about it, and we had some interest. And then a few years ago, I woke up with a start at like 5 a.m, and I just went, you could do 2 of these and they would connect. You could do one in Shanghai and do one near Chicago, let's say Pittsburgh, and then those patterns would be traceable, trackable, and you could mark them. If this Fibonacci sequence went through your grandma's backyard 20 miles south of Tulsa, she could make a line on her back 10 acres and say, that's the Fibonacci sequence, and it connects to Chicago, and it connects to Qatar. So when the World Cup came along, I really, really, really wanted to go to Qatar, and I made efforts, and then COVID came along and blew the whole thing out of the water. I still thought I might have a chance. I was visiting with Pele's manager, Joe Fraga, up until about a month ago, about the possibility of getting over there to talk to Sheikha Maisha Al Thani. She's powerful enough she could make this happen. And I was going to see if they would at least talk about it. It'd take a year or two to do, but create the Fibonacci sequence. Then picture this design with 40-foot tall rock formations. It would take a lot of money to do it, a lot of time. And then it would spiral out, and then on the 20 acres, it would reappear and disappear and reappear until it got off the site. And then it would go out into the world. And you would be able to look at, with all of the modern technologies and GPS and everything, you could find it. And I just couldn't get over there and make that happen. So at my age, I still want to make this happen someplace. I've got to find the place in the United States. And where it connects, you could actually do 3, but where it connects probably will depend, well, obviously will depend on where they might intersect. And because the world is mostly ocean, there's a way better chance that connection will be in the water someplace. But you could certainly meet in boats out there with a flotilla and celebrate it if you wanted. So it's the craziest idea I've ever had. I will really be disappointed if I don't pull that off before I die.
Well, I think you're going to get it done. I think you're going to sally forth and make sure that happens. And John, I'll throw it over to you for some commentary about these initiatives. I've never created anything quite like this. I have created artwork and things of that nature, writing articles and long papers and so forth. And there's such a wonderful feeling that you get when it's done, and you can kind of sit back and go, wow, there it is. And you just appreciate it. And you can't rest on your laurels too long, but you can at least savor the work that you've created. I think that's one of the best parts of creating artwork, is to just look at it and go, wow, there it is. We did it. So now that this Maya Angelou piece is done and it's absolutely gorgeous, I looked at pictures, I'm like, wow, that's gorgeous. How does that feel from your perspective to know that it's done, it's in the world right now?
Well, it feels good, but honestly, the work is not done. It's just beginning. I have been working away the past 48 hours to get this story out to the world. Part of my responsibilities were capturing via drone and video photos, and then getting all of that in a form that can then be sent out and distributed to news agencies far and wide. So right now, the project, the art piece is completed, but really there's a whole nother leg to this process. And being a nonprofit, we are reaching out to everyone and anyone who wants to get involved, whether that's giving our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or TikToks a follow or like, or to reach out.
We have all of those?
We do. We do. We have all of what I just named. And I think Eric can maybe provide details for viewers interested, but also we are taking donations. And the goal of this nonprofit is to be able to create some of these immensely beneficial art pieces to get people to critically think, to get people to go outside of their comfort zone and to make magic happen, like some of the ideas that Stan has talked about, such as the Fibonacci sequence or the large horse or going to Brazil. All of these things are possible with the help of people supporting the arts and supporting these dreams.
Yeah, that's great. And on Twitter, it's T Herd Initiative. That's THERD Initiative. Look those folks up on the Twitterverse. But as you heard, these other platforms as well, and we're certainly going to share our story or our version of your story with our audience, both now and in the coming weeks. And it's just very, again, I'll go back to this word inspirational, right? Because when you're down, when you feel like you can't go any further, you have to dig deep, and that's hope. Hope springs eternal. You know, we know these from ancient texts. It's not a new challenge. It's not a new problem. It's not a new solution either. To pray for people. And I guess I'll leave you with this. Something I learned about 12 years ago. I heard a guy from the Himalayan Institute. My wife took me to hear him speak, and he gave a sermon on the secret to happiness. And I was like, well, do tell, brother, do tell. Yeah. And he got up there, and it's a one-word answer. It may surprise some people. You might think love or caring, and it's related to those things. But the word is compassion. And what he said is the more compassion that you show to people in your life, the happier you're going to be. And so what's the opposite of compassion? If there is an opposite, it's really judgment, right? It's really like just wagging your finger and saying you're a bad person or that kind of thing. And his point is like, don't go there. I mean, there are legal systems for dealing with crimes and alleged crimes and so forth. But in your personal life, just try to be compassionate towards people. That doesn't mean you need to spend all day with someone you don't like, for example. I mean, there is something to be said for chemistry and for just maintaining your own persona in this world and being honest with yourself. But I thought that was a very powerful message. I'll just throw it to each of you for final commentary, because art, in a way, is a form of showing compassion. What do you think, Stan?
Well, we just did a portrait of Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor, with Mark Pollock, who worked under the tutelage of Mr. Wiesel for a number of years. And Ellie's incredible quote that we put in the ground last year around the Super Bowl was, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference.
Yeah.
That's and right. It's apathy could be another word that would be the opposite of compassion.
Yeah.
You have compassion or you don't care. And right. We're kind of living, and if you can drag people out of that feeling apathetic about their life and why we're here, then if you can drag them out of that, and we kind of naively maybe, but we hope that the art does that.
Yeah, well, we've got 1 minute and 40 seconds. So your final comments, John Czar.
I feel that art is a very powerful medium for expression and for being able to get everything out there. And especially with the art form, these earthworks that we're creating, the point is to be able to get someone to stop from their daily routine, from the grind. And as you were saying earlier, to be able to get that inspiration, to be able to have an opportunity to inspire or to have people once again critically think or think outside their perspective, even for a moment, that to me is what the power of art is all about. And that is what I feel we are trying to do.
Yeah, that's a fantastic message. And I just love the way you keep it simple like that. And the mission again is to provide a mechanism, an artistic mechanism by which someone can just take a deep breath and just hold on and recognize that there are bigger issues in the world. There are bigger things going on. There's a lot we can always do, smiles go a long way to help people feel better in a difficult world, So you guys are creating lots of smiles, and that's just a beautiful thing. I'm getting choked up here thinking about it because it's very special. So look these guys up online, folks. Stan Herd and John Czar of the Herd Initiative, HERD Initiative. We'll talk to you next time, folks. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.
If you want to